The desert never forgets. It holds on to everything, every footprint, every lie, every bad decision that seemed small at the time. I used to think the border was just a line on a map, but it isn't. It's a mirror. It shows you who you really are when the choices run out. My name is Lucía Morales, and I wasn't born to be a criminal. I was born in El Paso on a hot summer afternoon when the sky looked like burning copper. My mother used to say I came into this world fighting. I was 2 months early and screaming before I even took my first breath. She thought that meant I'd survive anything. She didn't know that sometimes survival comes dressed as a mistake. I grew up in a 1-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. My father fixed cars until his lungs gave out from years of breathing in exhaust fumes. When he died, all we had left was his old Impala and a stack of unpaid medical bills. My mother cleaned motel rooms and worked double shifts just to keep us from being thrown out. My little brother Mateo was still in high school, and every time I looked at him, I promised myself I'd make life easier for him. That promise would be the chain around my neck. I was working nights at Luna's Diner, a cracked neon sign flickering against the highway. My hair always smelled like grease and coffee, and my hands were raw from washing dishes. The regulars came and went, truckers, drifters, tired men with secrets they tried to drown in black coffee. That's where I met Diego. He was the kind of man you notice without wanting to. Smooth voice, expensive boots, a watch that didn't belong in a place like Luna's. He sat in the corner booth near the jukebox and ordered the same thing every time: eggs, toast, and coffee strong enough to melt paint. He tipped big, smiled easy, and listened when I talked about my mother's health and the bills that never stopped. "You're too smart for this place," he said once, sliding an envelope across the counter. "I could use someone like you. Someone who knows how to keep quiet." I didn't open it right away. I waited until the end of my shift, sitting in my car with the engine off, the night pressing against the windows. Inside was $500. No note, just cash. I should have thrown it away, but I didn't. A week later, he asked if I could drive something for him, just across the border to Las Cruces. He said, "Nothing dangerous, just some medical supplies. You'll be helping people, really." I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe I was helping. The first trip was easy. A different car, an address on a folded paper, and a promise that it would all be fine. I didn't even look in the trunk. I just drove, hands gripping the wheel, music low, trying not to think about what I might be carrying. At the drop-off, a man in a gray hoodie handed me another envelope, $2,000 this time. My heart pounded as I drove back, adrenaline mixing with shame. For a while, it worked. The bills got paid, my mother's medication was covered, Mateo got his braces. And every time guilt whispered in my ear, I told myself it was just one more job, just until we were stable. But the thing about easy money is that it never feels like enough. You start to forget what fear feels like until it comes back to collect. Diego became more demanding. The trips got longer, the cars heavier, the instructions stricter. Don't open the trunk, don't talk to anyone, don't stop for gas near the checkpoint. I didn't ask questions anymore because I already knew the answers would ruin me. It was late January when he called me with what he called a simple run. He said it was the last one. He promised it was clean. I almost believed him. The Impala was already loaded when I met him behind a gas station outside Juarez. He looked nervous, checking his phone every few seconds. When I asked what was inside, He gave me that smile that never reached his eyes. "Just merchandise," he said. "Get it across and you're done. No more diner, no more bills." The border was quiet that morning. The sun hadn't climbed over the mountains, and the air was cold enough to sting. I remember gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Every few miles, I rehearsed what I'd say if they stopped me. Visiting family, running errands, anything that sounded boring and harmless. But nothing about me felt harmless. My pulse was in my ears, my breath shallow. The line of cars ahead moved slowly, brake lights blinking in rhythm like a heartbeat. When I reached the checkpoint, a young border agent stepped forward. He looked barely older than Mateo. "Good morning, ma'am," he said. "Where are you headed?" I smiled the way Diego told me to, polite but detached. "Las Cruces, visiting a friend." He nodded, eyes flicking to the car's registration, then back to my face. "Pop the trunk for me, please." My throat dried. The key trembled in my hand as I pressed the release. The trunk lifted, slow as confession. What happened next felt like the world slowing down. The agent frowned, called for another officer, and within seconds the air filled with the static of radios and orders. They told me to step out of the car. I tried to speak, but my voice cracked. Inside the trunk, under a layer of old blankets, were bricks wrapped in aluminum and tape, at least a dozen. I didn't need to be told what they were. Fentanyl. Enough to destroy hundreds of lives. The rest was a blur of handcuffs, questions, and the cold metal bench of a holding room. The female officer who took my statement looked tired. Not cruel, just used to stories like mine. She asked if I knew what I was carrying. I said I didn't. Maybe I didn't want to know until it was too late. They booked me, processed me, and sent me to a small detention facility outside Deming. I spent the first night staring at the ceiling, thinking about my mother. She'd call my phone and it would just ring. She'd think I'd finally left town for good. Maybe that would have been kinder. The weeks followed were endless. Paperwork, hearings, a court-appointed lawyer who told me the best I could hope was a plea deal. I told him I'd been tricked, that I didn't know what was in the car. He sighed like he'd heard that 100 times before. Maybe he had. Diego vanished. His number disconnected, his name suddenly untraceable. I realized I'd been disposable from the start, just a woman with debts, a clean record, and a dying mother. Perfect camouflage for a courier no one would suspect until it was too late. I pled guilty to a lesser charge. The judge looked at me with that mix of pity and judgment that people reserve for sinners who don't look like criminals. 2 years, he said. Maybe less with good behavior. My mother never made it to the hearing. Her health had worsened, and by the time I wrote her from prison, she was gone. I never cried during the trial, but when I got her last letter, shaky handwriting telling me that she forgave me, that she knew I was only trying to help, I broke. I think that was the first real punishment. The law takes your freedom. Guilt takes everything else. Prison wasn't what I expected. It was quieter, sadder. Most of the women there weren't hardened criminals. They were people like me, pushed too far by life. Mothers, daughters, addicts, the forgotten. We shared stories in whispers, stories of choices that began with love and ended with loss. There was one woman, Elena, who used to read to me at night from a torn Bible. She said, "You can start over. The world doesn't care what you've done, only what you do next." I didn't believe her at first, but the words stayed with me, echoing like a promise. When I was released,
I walked out with a paper bag of belongings and a record that would follow me forever. I found work cleaning motel rooms, the same kind my mother used to clean. Every time I changed the sheets, I thought about her. Every time I vacuumed the floor, I thought about that car, that trunk, that moment when everything could have been different. Months passed. The world didn't stop turning. People forgot my name. But I didn't forget the faces. The agent who arrested me, the lawyer who tried his best, the women who shared their stories behind bars. They were all pieces of the same puzzle, the price of desperation. Sometimes, when the sky burns orange over the desert, I drive out toward the border. I park near the checkpoint, far enough that no one knows.